All right, everybody. So welcome to Can You Believe It? I think we are in week 6, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so we're progressing quite nicely here. Let me go ahead and let's look over our course page with you, so I can show you just a few things. Okay, so uh, so we are fairly light. We have a fairly light week this week in terms of other assignments. The major assignment this week is our exercise on the introduction to SPSS, which I'll be walking through today with you all. So let's take a look at the syllabus. All right, so we are in week 6 sampling. We'll be working on exercise 3, which is the SPSS. Okay. A lot of you have been messaging me about things, which is great. I am not wonderful at getting back to people, but I do try my best. And don't forget that you can text me if I don't get back to a message. Okay. That's why I provide my text, my cell phone, because I realize that I'm not perfect at getting back to people. Okay. So you can text me. Don't call me because I won't answer. But text me, and if I don't get back to a Canvas message, so message me first and then text me after that. Okay. If you have any feedback, any questions. Okay. And don't email because it's very hard to catch emails. I get so many through to college. Okay. Message me on Canvas. I have a much better chance of catching that. Okay, so we're on week 6. We only have one topic for the week, which is sampling. Okay. Um, so we have our exercise 3, our introduction to SPSS, which will be a large part of our focus for today. We'll be using SPSS throughout the course, so we want to get off on a good foot with it. So something I do just want to point out for next week. Next week is all about us creating our surveys to collect data for our projects, which is hopefully very exciting. So we'll draft up our surveys and then we'll send them out soon after that. So progress check 3 will be a draft of your survey. So we're really moving in the direction of getting your research projects rolling and getting, to collecting data. Okay. So there we have it. We are really inching close to the middle of the semester. So hopefully you remember when I introduced the course, I talked a little bit about how the first half of the course is different than the second half, sort of, characteristically different from each other, because in the second half of the course, we're putting a lot more effort into our specific projects, and we'll be on our own sort of timelines in a way after that. So that's where we are. So let's go ahead and move down to this week. Open up a module. Okay. Oh, I don't have this week published. Okay, so let me just take you to teacher view. You can see behind the scenes. Okay, so sampling. I will have these lectures up. They'll probably be, well, this is the one I'm doing right now. So, and this one I've already recorded, so that'll be up soon. But anyhow, so we will be going over sampling. I've kind of been doing a summary in these introductory things. I don't know. Tell me if you guys like it. I kind of feel like I'm just lecturing twice, so I'm not going to do it this time. But if you miss it, then let me know. Okay. But we're going to be going over sampling, probability sampling, and non-probability sampling. You've probably heard of random sampling, and then so different types of random sampling, and then different types of non-random sampling, talking about the limitations, issues with sampling, sampling error, margin error, things like that. Okay. So, basically sampling is how we make conclusions about populations of people. And we had a great example in our first article assignment, recently, where you had to look at a sample of people where they were taking a look at the effects of alcohol on self-perceived attraction. So, which most of you did really good on that assignment, so fantastic. Just trying to see what the relationship was. Does alcohol have a significant effect on self-perceived attractiveness? And they did this by taking a sample of people, conducting a study, and then making conclusions that we can hopefully draw to others, right? When we talked about generalization a couple topics back as well, that's all interrelated. So, so we'll talk about why we use samples, how samples are meant to represent the population. That's the goal, is they're meant to, why it's important that we sample in the best way possible, the different strategies, and so on. So the other main thing I want to do for us today is a demo of exercise 3. So you guys just finished your introduction section, right? Or you're working on, yeah, you just finished it last week. Okay. So, right. So let's go ahead and take a look at exercise 3. Maybe. Come on, open up. There we go. Okay. Right, so you're going to be using at SPSS in the VVC portal, right? So this is the first time that we're taking a look at SPSS in this class, so I want to make sure that I take some time to go over it with you. You may have used it in your statistics class, hopefully you did. So I'm going to get the instructions out for you here. Right, so let's download them. So I have, I can have them for reference. So SPSS. All right, that's very helpful. All right, so we can think of, now we've used Excel, and now we'll use SPSS. We can think of Excel or Google Docs, Google Sheets as data organization software, right? You can organize and describe data in those, but SPSS is really built for specifically analysis, statistical analysis. It's built for setting up your variables in such a way that you can manipulate them into many different types of analyses. So let's give it a go, all right? SPSS is our friend, okay? Even if it first feels a little bit difficult to navigate, it ultimately saves us a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of stress when it comes to data management and analysis. So let's give it a go. I'll be using my version of SPSS here because it's the most current version. I like to stick with the most current version. Your version will be nearly identical with maybe minor differences. So that's the case with any software that we use in the class. Let's go ahead and when you start working with SPSS, you'll want to open a new data set. And then in the instructions here, I give us a little bit of info. We're using the same research scenario that we used on exercise 1, comparing non-gamers and gamers across a couple of variables. So we're going to compare them on hand-eye coordination scores, and we're going to compare them on their ability to pass a problem-solving task. So I have that here. All right, this is the same research scenario, and then I give you how to open an SPSS file. So this is already where things are a little bit different. Right, when you open SPSS, it's going to give you 2 windows. It's going to give you one that looks like this. This might remind you of Excel because it's a spreadsheet. You can insert values. But it will also give you something called an output. So when you first open it, it's going to be blank. So what it will say here is basically saying that this output is going to rely on data set number 1. We have data set number 1 over here. So how this works is when you run analyses, it's going to put them over here in the output. These are 2 different files, so you have to save these files separately from each other. You have to save the data set and the output like they're totally separate from each other. You need both. You need both in order to run analyses. So I have a little note about that here, all right? So you get a .sav file and an SPV file. So that's the first thing. And the next thing, we have a few of the major features of SPSS. So again, if you're using through VVC portal, these tabs file, edit, data, analyze will be actually attached to your SPSS window, most likely. Mine are just up here. So those are the tabs we'll use to navigate. And then just like Excel, we have columns and we have rows. Our columns are variables, all right? See that it says VAR up here on top? Those are variable names, and then we have rows of data. So that's the screen here, and then for the output, you can navigate from the output as well. You can use these tabs when you're accessing your output, and then anything that you run in SPS will come out over here. The first thing that we're going to do is set up some variables in SPSS. So this is where SPSS is pretty nice. It's a little bit smart, and that you can tell it what type of data you're going to give it. We talked about all the types of data and how important they are. I mean, SPSS can handle that right in a way that Excel and Google Sheets can't. So down here at the bottom right, we have data view and variable view. So notice that when I switch over from data view to variable view, it looks different, right? We have these labels up here, name, type with values. These are different criteria of your variable. Data view takes you back to your spreadsheet. So generally in SPSS, you start in the variable view tab. You want to tell SPSS what type of variables you're going to use. So for me, my toggle is down here on the bottom, data view, variable view. Yours might be in the bottom left, it might be in the bottom right, or it all depends on what version you're using, but you should be able to find these at the bottom of your screen. So in variable view, we're going to do a couple of things. Going to input the variables that we need. We're going to use the same 4 variables that we used on exercise 1. So we'll need participant, right? We'll need gamer, we'll need hand-eye coordination scores, and we'll need problem solving. Right? SPSS is a little bit picky. You can't put spaces in here, and you can't start these variable names with numbers. So I have that info here. So if it gives you an error, just make sure that there are no spaces. If you wanted to put a space, you can use something like an underscore. So if you wanted to do something like participant number, you could do participant underscore number, but we can't have any spaces. So this is how you get your variables in. So now if I hop back to data view, you can see that it's actually labeled those variables here, right? So it's saying that column 1 will be for the participant variable, gamer, gamers for the gamer variable. But we can do a little bit more, all right? Over here in this variable view, we can edit a few different things. We can tell SPSS more about the type of data that we're about to give it. More specifically, we can tell it the type of data based on a few different criteria. So remember back to a few topics ago, we talked about nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio data. SPSS wants to know what type of data you're using. So there are 3 types, and you will find them over here in the measure column. So participant number, we're not going to worry too much about because those are truly just labels. But if we click on save the game or category, it will give us 3 options. It will give us nominal or no, and then scale. Scale encompasses interval and ratio, and basically means that your values fall on a number line scale, that they're not ranked and they're not categorical. But for the gamer variable, this is a category, so you're either going to be put into the gamer or non-gamer category. So we'll go ahead and label it as nominal. Hand-eye coordination scores were measured in minutes, which is on a scale. Time is measured on a scale. We didn't rank people. The fastest, to the least fast, right? We just recorded the time in minutes. So that would be a scale. And then for problem solving, we had people either pass or fail. So 2 distinct categories. So again, we put that info in here. If we go back to data view, you can see now that there are variable labels are a little bit different now. It shows us which variables are scale and which are nominal or categorical. So that's the first step. So moving on through the instructions here, we want to also code our data. So again, thinking back to exercise 1, even though it was quite a few weeks ago now, and we talked about how we can code to simplify data. So for example, if we're talking about gamers and non-gamers, we have 2 groups. We can simplify 2 groups very simply into 0s and 1s in terms of code. So we use 0s and 1s to input into Excel before, but now we can kind of take that a step further. There's a column here called values. So let's go ahead and go to the values column for gamer. So I clicked into this value cell, and then there's a little dot button here. If I click into that, it actually lets you label different categories with values. So maybe we want a 0 for our non-gamers, and then we want a 1 for our gamers, right? If we press OK, now we have some numeric codes to identify our 2 different groups here. We'll go ahead and do the same thing for the problem solving task, or it is 0 means that they failed the task. 1 means that they pass the task. So remember that we code data to simplify it. All right. So if we go back to data view, we're about ready to input our data. So let me go ahead and move this over. So we'll have our participant numbers in here. All right. So I'll put our participant numbers in here. And now we can input our data very simply using ones and zeros, where zeros mean non-gamers and ones mean gamers. Okay. Kind of keep moving my zoom bar around so I can see what I'm doing. All right. So we have some codes in here showing us that we have 2 different groups being represented by zeros and ones, gamers and non-gamers. And there's actually a wonderful little button here that if we click it, it'll switch between our codes and our labels, our values and our labels. So we can keep it very simple. This helps us input data quicker. We can also quickly toggle it off to see what those labels were again. All right, putting a little bit more info in here, we'll input the data again. All right, I'm going to input these scores. Here's a pro tip for you. If you have your exercise 1 lying around, you can actually just copy and paste the data in here if your data is input correctly. You can copy and paste that original data over here into SPSS. So let me go ahead and put this in here. We have those hand-eye coordination scores, and I'm saying for problem solving, we have these codes. I can put them in simplify our data input process. All right. Then if I click this button again, I can see, oh no, did not save my codes over here. It didn't save my codes, but I can fix that. So 0 is a fail, right? 1 is a pass. So let's go ahead and save that. All right, there we go. So now you can see who passed, who failed, who's a gamer, who's a non-gamer, but then we can keep it very tidy. At the point of coding is to streamline our data without losing any information, right? When we have categories, we don't want to lose out on any info here. Then once your data is in, you're ready to analyze, you're ready to get some statistics. And so remember that descriptive statistics describe data, right? Think means, averages, mean, median, mode, standard deviation, percentages. Those are all things that describe data for our descriptive statistics. So let's go ahead and do our first. Our first run of this, you go to the Analyze tab, you go to Descriptive Statistics, and we'll start out here in Descriptives. All right, so we're going to do some descriptive statistics, but we're going to discriminate here between our nominal and our scale variables because we can't say calculate an average of those who passed and failed, right? It doesn't quite work, but we can calculate an average for hand-eye coordination scores. So I'll go ahead and move that into the variable box, and then we'll click into options. When you click into options, it'll give you some options. Right here are some options. It's asking you and saying, what do you want to calculate? And I have you select just a few of these, right? Select a few of these options, press continue, we press OK. And then it takes us over to our output, right? So it took us over to that output that was previously empty. And now we have a table in here that gives us some descriptive statistics. So basically what it's telling us is that we took 20, right? There's an end of 20. So we took all 20 data points. We got the range right. There's a range of 10 scores here. The minimum score was 5, the maximum. We got to some scores. This isn't so meaningful, and we ought to... the hand-eye coordination score for all 20 participants, the standard deviation, variance. All right, so lots of stats given to us very quickly. So SPSS is basically just a large calculator specifically for statistics, right? So that's our first go. But let's try something else, right? Let's try to do what we did in Excel, where we compare the means of hand-eye coordination scores between gamers and non-gamers. Luck would have it, all right, if we go to Analyze and we go to Compare Means, and then to Means, and there's actually an option for us to compare means by group. So it's asking down here for the independent list. It's asking for our independent variable, which would be gamers. That's our predicting variable. And then our outcome variable. So let's go ahead and compare hand-eye coordination scores across gamer groups, right? So I have the screenshots of what I'm doing over here. I press OK. It'll give me a few more tables. Gives me one table saying that, hey, we ran data for 20% of cases. We ran it for all of our cases, right? No one was excluded. All right, that's SPSS's way of telling you there was no issue in your data, right? If this comes back as less than 100%, that means something didn't get included. But then here's your report. Here's your mean comparisons. We have non-gamers here, gamers here, and then we have their mean hand-eye coordination scores. And then in addition to that, we have our or our total number of participants in each group, and we have standard deviation. So nice and quick, takes no time at all. We can compare those means. This is a bit quicker than Excel, right? Remember in Excel, we had to move and rearrange the data. We had to manually put in those calculations. Here they should be the same mean values. You should recognize them from Excel if you can remember back to that, plus some more info, right? So it's nice and it's quick. So that's how we get some descriptive statistics. That gives us our mean, our sample size, standard deviation. You can even ask for, say, median and in range, right? So if I have you go into, say, let's go back. We do analyze, compare means and means. If you go into options, you can actually pull a few others over, right? You can say, also pull over, say, you want the median range, the variance, right? Continue, press OK. It'll give you some more and get lots of descriptive statistics quickly in this way. Something else with the SPSS, again, if you're not familiar with using it, say you run something and then you say, oops, that wasn't right. Want to get rid of it, that you can just right click and cut to get rid of those things. So you only have what you need over here in your output. All right, so moving on, that's how we look at our descriptive statistics for our scale variables for interval ratio data. But we want to look at some different statistics for our categorical variables. So we'll do that by going back to analyze and descriptives. And then we'll go into crosstabs. Crosstab is a feature that compares two sets of categories. So we have two categorical variables. We have whether or not someone is a gamer and whether or not they pass the problem solving task. So I pulled them over here. If you have the option, you should click on this display clustered bar charts. Not every version of Excel will have this, so it's not a problem if you don't. There are other options and things that we can go in here and toggle on and off. We won't worry about them for now, but you can go poke in and sort of see what is available if you'd like. Press OK. All right, now what it's giving us is the proportion of those who passed and failed the problem-solving tasks in the gamer and non-gamer group. So if we read this chart, we can see that 8 of the non-gamers failed the task, while the other non-gamers passed the task. We look in the gamer row, we can see that 2 gamers failed and 8 gamers passed. And then we can see the totals here as well. So again, remembering back to our exercise 1, this is when we summed up the pass scores, right? When we summed up the scores, and we saw that 20% of gamers, 20% of non-gamers passed, while 80% of gamers passed. And then it might have printed you out this wonderful bar chart if you had the option. We're going to actually learn how to make this chart manually in this exercise as well. All right, so there you have it. You have some general proportions, some scores of how many individuals we have in each group who passed and failed the problem-solving task. The last thing I have us do is make some graphs in SPSS. We make graphs in both Excel and SPSS throughout the class, so I just want to show you some basic graph making here. So for the first one, we go to the graph tabs and we go to legacy dialogues. This lets you make a number of different types of graphs. And what we'll go in here, and we're just going to make a simple bar chart. So this window can be a little bit confusing, but you click on these to choose which one that you want to use, will want to use this first option, the simple bar chart. So we'll go ahead and press define and we'll include some info in our bar chart. We're going to try and replicate the first bar chart that we made in our exercise 1, where we compared the mean hand-eye coordination scores across our gaming groups. So we'll put gamer into this category access box. This basically just means that that's how we'll separate our x-axis, and then we're going to use the mean of hand-eye coordination scores as our other variable. Here we press OK. You get a lovely little graph comparing the 2 mean scores across gamers and non-gamers. We'll make one more graph. This is a graph for what we would call continuous data, meaning that we have mean scores over here on the y-axis, and then we'll manually make one more graph. We'll make a clustered bar chart. So we go to graphs, legacy dialogues, bar, and this time instead of simple, we'll choose this cluster option. We'll go ahead and define it. Right, this time we're doing something a little bit different because we're comparing 2 categorical variables. So we still want gamer as our category axis, and then we want our clusters to be the problem-solving tasks. Right, if you press OK, you end up with a little clustered bar chart that tells you something fairly specific. It's telling us that we're comparing gamers to non-gamers, and we're seeing if there's a difference in the number of those who pass or fail the problem-solving task. And then that's it for us, all right? So that's it for this lab. So let me share a few pieces of info with you here. Let me remind you that you need to share, or save rather, your output separately from your data. So this is what you need to share with me. What you need to upload to me would be your output. That looks like this, all right? So you would save it. You would want to make sure that you save it somewhere. You can find it. Remember, when in doubt, save your output to upload to me. But then I always advise saving your data as well for future reference, right? In case something goes wrong, you don't have to go in and redo this step. Remember that you just need to save this separately, right? So you save this separately. It's a separate file. These are two different files. They will not save together. All right. So if you have any questions on this assignment, let me know. This is due at the end of the week. And again, it's our first time using SPSS, so make sure you give yourself some time to play around in SPSS a little bit. Don't be afraid of the SPSS. It is here to help you. It'll make things way faster. And the more you use it, the more comfortable you get, the quicker you can do these types of analyses. You'll be doing analyses like this on your own data towards the end of the course. So this is our primer. Okay? And I think I'll go ahead and leave it at that. All right? So remember, you guys should have your introductions done by now. I'll be getting that back to you. We have this assignment due by the end of the week. So be in touch with any questions, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording here. But as always, feel free to message me as often as you need to.